and welcome to the podcast that is more Carlton Cole and less Cole Palmer. It's the big man up top.
It certainly is. How are you, Joe?
I'm good, Ed. I've just had a green tea.
Oh,
Are you a fan of a green tea?
well, I've got to be honest. It sounds a bit woke for me. That
It did taste a bit like grass. We've got a new member of the team at UCB1, and she's brought in some green tea. I don't know if it's a bit of a welcome gift, whatever.
yeah, sounds
But
great.
she's made me one this afternoon, and it was fine.
It was I feel like if there was a word to describe green tea, it would not be fine. It would either it's great, it's invigorating, it's a taste sensation, or it's the most disgusting thing you've ever drank.
Yeah, it's meant to be really good for you.
Yeah, well, I
I'll
suppose.
report back next week.
Yeah, good. We've had an email, haven't we, Joe?
We've had an email from Mark, who
Fresh off the back of the email we had last week, we have another one.
Another Mark, and he is a Blades fan, also known as Sheffield United.
Good.
And he enjoyed our chat about what is your perfect weekend of football. And he said a perfect set of results for him is Blades win, of course.
Of course.
Owls lose.
Chef Wednesday.
Chef Wednesday. And I really love this, heavily or controversially.
Good.
What do you prefer? If a rival loses, do you want it to be heavy or controversial?
Good. Yeah. No, either your rival loses, 3 or 4-0, or loses 1-0 to a really dodgy penalty.
Yeah.
I get Mark. Both are equally satisfying.
He also goes on to share that he loves Jesus and he came to know him because of his love for Sheffield United.
Oh, go on.
Billy Graham came to Bramall Lane and he was saved on the pitch, aged 19.
That's fantastic.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really cool. Just that idea of it being at your home team's stadium. Yeah, I love it.
And then he just finishes off by saying that I always add on, had Billy Graham been at Hillsborough, he wouldn't have gone.
Well, listen, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
He does.
He knew that Billy Graham had to be at Bramall Lane. And look, fair enough.
Fair play.
Yeah, exactly. I love that story. That's absolutely fantastic. And if you want to get in touch, podcasts at ucb.co.uk. Tell us about your great weekends of football results. So we've come to the time in the show, Joe, very early on, where we are looking at our trivia. This is Bible Ballers.
Yes.
What's the score currently? 5-3?
I think you got it right last week,
I
didn't
did,
you?
yeah, 5-3. So this is Guess the Player with a Difference. So I will basically be quizzing Joe this week with a Guess the Player question. The difference is that the first name of this player, he'll share it with the name of a book in the Bible. Are you ready for this one?
Yes.
Which German attacking midfielder scored 170 goals for Borussia Dortmund and was the featured player on the front cover of FIFA 17?
I knew you were going to say FIFA 17.
Do you think you know?
I think I know, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So
Do you want me to tell you now? Or
No,
add some suspense?
no, we've got to keep the suspense going.
Well, I'll talk you through a few other options. Obviously, Thomas Muller, but he didn't play for Borussia Dortmund. Mario Götze. There isn't a book of Mario.
There isn't.
No.
There could be.
There could be.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm quite confident.
Okay, good. Well, we'll see how you get on later in the show.
So speaking of Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, they played each other this weekend.
They did, a big Steel City derby, and it was quite amusing actually because Mark had mentioned this in his email, that this is the biggest weekend of his football season when they play Sheffield Wednesday. And he actually sent me a follow-up email mid-game.
Did he?
Yeah. He was very much on edge the whole time.
Yeah, they're horrible, aren't they, derbies?
I feel like nobody looks forward to them
No.
except neutrals.
It's all about bragging rights.
It's all about bragging rights, exactly. But yeah, Sheffield United beat Sheffield Wednesday 1-0 in the Sheffield derby.
They're having quite a good season, aren't they, Sheffield United? Ready to bounce straight back up into the Premier League, still under the guise of Chris Wilder.
Yes.
Of course.
Elsewhere in the Championship, there were some other really exciting games going on. Middlesbrough beating Luton 5-1.
Big win.
Big win. I think it speaks more of Luton's continuing implosion than anything else.
Yeah, this has been a surprise, actually, hasn't it? Because you expect a team to go down are just going to come, at least challenge to come straight back up. And Luton they've not lost that many players.
Yeah, they're definitely going down the route of a Wigan rather than a Norwich, let's say. And it's unfortunately not going very well. Rob Edwards apologised to their fans. He didn't say he was going to get the sack or anything, but I think he said something like it's in the hands of the owners now, thing, which is never a good sign.
It's never a good sign. He's done so much for that club as well.
Absolutely. A couple of big results at the top. Sunderland, they threw away a 2-0 lead at home, and Coventry got a massive point, which I think is, you can't argue with that. Getting a point from being 2-0 down, you've got to take that. And
you can't. From Sunderland's point of view, that is disappointing.
It is disappointing.
Top of the league, you shouldn't be letting... You know what they say about 2-0? 2-0 leads?
It's the most dangerous scoreline,
and
Joe.
have you seen who has been linked with the Coventry job today?
No, I've not.
Frankie Lampard.
Of course he has. Yes. Lovely stuff. I'm sure.
That feels like his level, I think.
Yeah, good. Another team in blue. Speaking of 2-0 leads, Leeds managed to hold on to their 2-0 lead at home to QPR, back to winning ways and up to second in the league. QPR without a win in 11. The big one, though.
Go on.
It's on the lips of everybody, is Stoke 1, Millwall 1. And listen, the video is everywhere of the penalty that Stoke were denied. The ball was ricocheting around the box after a corner. It's bounced and fell to Wouter Berger, our midfielder, to basically just smash it home from 2 yards. And the defender behind him has just basically wrestled him to the ground. Clear penalty, clear red card. And the referee ended up booking the Stoke player for his protest.
Yeah. As much as I'd love to disagree with you here, it's a bit of a stonewaller.
It was an absolute
He's basically
stonewaller.
Just dragged him to the floor.
He did. But it was a really great game. Stoke, I think, we're a couple of months into the Narcis Palak era and starting to gain a real tactical identity. 7 points in a week, which has helped push Stoke up the table. Anthony, the producer, was really keen that I point out that also Millwall are unbeaten in 5, which is actually also, they're doing very well as well.
Yeah. Would you like to see them in the Premier League?
I think so. They're just a club that ruffles feathers, don't they? So
I think it would be quite interesting.
Should we have a look at League 1 and League 2 as well?
It'd be rude not to.
It'd be rude not to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of interesting stories. Wycombe winning again after a 1-0 away victory at Wigan. Wrexham, of course, the Hollywood favourites, also winning 1-0 in a hard-fought game at home to Mansfield. But interestingly, also up there, Chris Davis's Birmingham were held at home to Northampton, and in their second draw on the spin.
Some big hitters in League 1 this year.
Some big hitters.
You've got Birmingham, Wrexham at the top. Teams like Reading, Bolton. It's like the Premier League in the mid-noughties.
It certainly is. Going into League 2, top of the table Port Vale followed their FA Cup defeat last weekend with a defeat in the league away at Gillingham. So they've been doing really well, but now two defeats on the bounce for the Vale. But what I particularly enjoyed was the rest of the playoff sides who, have this opportunity to capitalise. It was all the playoff teams, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, Walsall, Notts County, Doncaster and Crewe were all playing each other.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah. And they played out 2 1-1 draws. so no one capitalised.
No one made the most of it then.
No. But there's a little roundup of the EFL for you. Let's get on to the Premier League.
Let's go to the Premier League quickly. Whistle stop tour. I want to start at Ipswich, Ed, if you don't mind.
Or more specifically, at Spurs.
At Spurs, yes. Ipswich got their first win of the Premier League season. It's been coming, hasn't it?
It's been coming. I've got to be honest. There's teams that come up and you just, I don't know what it is, you just sort of root for them, don't you? And
I think it's
Ipswich
often the playoff team, isn't it? Because they're almost certainly the third best team in the Championship the season before. What
I particularly enjoyed about this game was we had Spurs, who absolutely love conceding first, and then Ipswich, who absolutely love going in the lead and then giving it away.
Yeah.
So when Ipswich go 2-0 up, you think this could go genuinely anywhere.
It was genuinely exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what could happen here? And like you say, Spurs concede first a lot of the time. They've actually conceded first in 13 games.
Gosh.
At home in 2024.
That's too many, isn't it?
13 games at home. That's most of them.
Another thing I spotted was Pedro Porro whipping up the crowd when they were 2-0 down. The ball had gone out for a corner, I think, and he did the sort of arm gesturing and all that. And I just thought, Well, why don't you stop going 2-0 down then? Like, the fans must be getting really sick of being in this position.
Brighton 2, Man City 1.
I know, this was really the big story, wasn't it?
Yeah,
from the weekend.
Absolutely massive. City go a goal ahead, and you think they'll probably just see this out. You know, they're not going to lose 4 in a row, are they, Ed?
Well, apparently they did. And the thing is like, generally watching this game, Brighton grew into it. City looked in control, and then they clearly looked very tired as well, which I think is remarkable, but they sort of faded.
Yeah, I think they're tired. I think Pep looks very tired and a bit done.
Yeah.
But I think the last few years, they often have a spell. They don't lose 4 in a row, but they often have a bit of a, blip at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And you see Pep do something described as genius. So he'll bring out some new tactical innovation that he's been plotting.
Yeah, overlapping goalkeepers or something. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like, a goalkeeper, playing out from the back probably stemmed from his style of play. Inverting a fullback was a big Pep move. John Stones playing as a midfielder. Whereas this season, I don't think, unless he's got something around the corner, it feels a bit like they're running out of ideas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see, because he's never run out of ideas before.
Liverpool beat Villa 2-0 on Saturday.
And how do you think Liverpool played? I thought Villa looked good, but I mean, clearly Liverpool were much better and much more dominant. Villa looked lively, but just a yard off that top tier.
Yeah. I think Villa had a plan. Yeah. I think out of possession, and we've said this before about Villa in big games, Emery is really good at putting together a plan for a specific game.
Yeah.
And I think he had this. He played 4 centre midfielders across the 4 midfielders. And it really limited the space for Liverpool. They couldn't really put together many chances. You know, the 2 goals came from 2 counter-attacks. But I think that's where Slot almost outsmarted Villa. He saw how they do their set pieces is that everyone's forward. Villa are so known for their set pieces. They've got your favourite set piece coach, Austin McPhee.
Austin McPhee, the Viking, yeah.
And they put everyone on the edge of the box. And I think Slot's seen that previously and thought, let's just put Salah and Nunez on the halfway line and break. And twice within 5 minutes that happened in the first half.
And they did. Liverpool looked devastated on the break. They, in truth, could have had more, really. The other big game on Sunday was Chelsea-Arsenal.
Yes, intriguing game.
It was. What did you make of that?
Firstly, I think there was a lot made of Odegaard coming back for Arsenal. I think they've really missed him over the last few weeks. Watched them play Inter on Wednesday, and they're just missing that final ball, that person that can just find that final pass. And he showed in this game what he brings. He picked out Martinelli for the opener, and he looked really good.
What I thought was interesting about this game was Chelsea are obviously continuing to look much improved on the last few years. Equally, Arsenal are in a little bit of a slump at the moment, or a bit below par, which actually made for quite an entertaining game.
Yeah.
Because I think 6 months ago, I think this would have been a comfortable Arsenal win, but in the end ended up being quite even and genuinely quite entertaining.
And I genuinely still think there's something to be said about Chelsea this season. I think no one really knows where they're at, but I think they've got a great coach now. I think they've got a great squad. I think they're quite fresh as well. So I think they're going to be up there. I don't think they're necessarily in the title race, but I think they'll get top 4, and I think they're looking really exciting.
Man United won 3-0, didn't they?
Yeah, that's a bit
just quietly won 3-0 at home. What did you think of United?
They were okay, weren't they, actually? I thought Bruno looked very good.
What I enjoyed about this, so I missed this game, but I read a bunch of reports and saw the highlights, and everything I kept reading was talking about how this was an unconvincing 3-0 win, how Leicester were quite unlucky, and I'm thinking, goodness me, what game did I miss? Yeah,
so this game wasn't on TV, so it was hard to really see what was going on. I didn't watch much of the day last night, Ed, I have to admit.
Oh dear.
But yeah, I think a lot. You're right. They had an XG of 0.7. Does that mean anything to you, Ed? Or
Probably not.
Bothered?
No.
But yeah, Steve Cooper was apparently quite annoyed at how well Leicester played and came away with nothing. What I will say about United is I think they're doing some quite weirdly good succession planning.
This is a very, very backhanded compliment. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, maybe we don't need the word weirdly there, but I think Ruud van Nistelrooy's been in charge for a few games now. Looked really good. In many senses of the words, we spoke about his turtleneck.
Oh, fantastic dress sense.
So good. But he's done really well. Granted, he's played Leicester at home twice. They played PAOK at home in the Europa League, won 2-0. And they've played Chelsea, got a decent 1-1 draw there. I think United a few years ago would see that and think, let's give the manager position to Ruud permanently. A bit like they did with Ollie a few years ago. Whereas here, what they've done is, okay, Ruud, you've got a few games here just to keep it ticking over. He's done really well. You've then got a manager coming in permanently. And although they've been in this weird space in between, I think it's actually really good planning to do that and not to act impulsively, which I think is something we've seen from United quite a lot since Fergie.
Well, let's keep an eye on the situation with Ruben Amorim and how he does when he comes in. Be interesting to see where they go. Brentford 3, Bournemouth 2. Yet again, 5 goals at Brentford's ground. It's a chaotic place to go, isn't it?
Well, it's the place you need to go for entertainment this season. I looked at the form tables. This means absolutely nothing. But often on these websites, you can look at what the table would look like just on home form, what the table would look like just on away form. Mm-hmm. So I had a look at that this morning. If it was home form, Brentford would be top.
Yeah.
If it was away form, Brentford would be 19th.
Wow.
They're so good at home.
Yeah.
They're quite bad away. And they're scoring so many goals. They've scored 22 goals already this season. They've also conceded 22 goals.
In the top 4 divisions of English football, no ground has seen more goals per game than Brentford's at an average of 4.83 goals per game. That's nearly 5 goals a game, Joe.
Get yourself to the G-Tech.
Get yourself to the G-Tech if you want to see some goals. So, Joe, we record this on Monday, November the 11th. We had the 2-minute silence for Armistice Day earlier on today in the UCB offices. And I think that, coupled with the awful news from last week, the attacks on Israeli supporters in Amsterdam as Maccabi Tel Aviv played away at Ajax in the Europa League, that all led me to think that it could be interesting to have a conversation about the role of football and world peace. Now, big topic, okay?
Yeah, we're gonna solve it all.
We're gonna solve it all. Now, here's the thing: look, this isn't a story about football violence. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But specifically, we wanted to look at the story behind it, particularly from the other night, the violence we saw in Amsterdam, the role of football in the midst of geopolitical tensions, and what that means, whether football can be a force for good, also whether it can hinder things as well. Now, it is worth saying just at this point that during that violence, there were reports of Maccabi fans singing racist chants, burning Palestinian flags, all that stuff, which we don't condone, and we don't want to get into which group of people is right or wrong here.
Yeah, that's not what this is about. I think you're right to say this isn't a violence thing. This is a politics thing.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. We're not choosing a side here, but we're saying what is football's role in this?
Absolutely. And so we're going to hear an interview I did with author and humanitarian Don Mullan, who has done a lot of amazing work as a peacekeeper and a humanitarian. So yeah,
let's hear it.
It's a pleasure to have on Don Mullan, author, humanitarian and friend. How are you doing today, Don?
I'm good, Ed, and it's always a pleasure.
So I'd like to just jump straight in and, get you to tell your story. It's an absolutely fascinating one. So tell us about your upbringing and everything you went through as a young person.
I was born in 1956. I grew up in one of the more troubled areas in Northern Ireland, a place called the Craigan Estate. But before the Troubles, 1966 was the World Cup in England, and it was the first World Cup to be broadcast. And boys then would gather in the local green to kind of emulate their heroes, Geoff Hurst and Bobby Moore and Pelé and Franz Beckenbauer and so on. And the 2 best players would pick their team in descending order of perceived kind of talent. But the last 2 picked had only one option, which was goalkeeper, because nobody wanted to be a goalkeeper. And that's how I ended up being a goalkeeper. But I grew to love the position. And then, of course, I saw the World Cup final in July 1966. And here was this goalkeeper for England called Gordon Banks. And for whatever reason, this man just captured my heart and my imagination. And that's an important story as well, because it was before the Troubles broke out. And when I used to play for my team in the Craigan Estate, which later became kind of a place that, where certainly the British Army, in some cases, would have feared coming into, and certainly wouldn't have been welcomed. I mean, I was the England goalkeeper, and I even dressed in the colours for England, which was the yellow top, blue shorts and white socks. And I even walked through Derry to find, and I probably got it in a Protestant area, the Three Lions, which my mother sewed on, So here I was, the England goalkeeper in the Craigan Estate. But the important thing, Ed, is that no adult ever told me I shouldn't do this, And that's really important, because they enjoyed my childhood fantasy, in a sense, thinking that I was Gordon Banks in my mind,
A huge part of your story is that you were a witness to the Bloody Sunday massacre. So just tell us about your memories of that day.
I was 15 years of age. It was my first ever civil rights march, and it was also protesting internment without trial. I lived in a no-go area. In other words, there was barricades up to keep the British Army out, and the British Army would come in pre-dawn raids, for example, maybe with big bulldozers to get rid of the barricades, and then they would have specific houses that they would maybe go and raid and so on. And I remember many, many nights like lying awake, with constant gun battles going on through the night, and they would end just as dawn was breaking. And we would still have to get up and go to school, But anyway, that particular day, paratroopers had been brought into Derry, and at a certain point, they began to move into the Bogside, and they opened fire. And 13 unarmed civilians were shot dead and 14 were wounded. And what really made it worse was the fact that within maybe 30, 40 minutes, a narrative was being spread that as the army moved in, they came under a fuselage of bombs and bullets, that they fired back at targeted gunmen and bombers. The next day, at a press conference in New York, at the British consulate, it was the same narrative was told, but they also added that some of those killed were on the Army's wanted list, all of which were lies. And the terrible thing about that for many young people, they came to what some might say was the logical conclusion: there's no such thing as British justice, because our community actually cooperated with the inquiry. I, as a 15-year-old, gave a statement, as did hundreds, almost 600 other people, which were ignored. And many, therefore, as a result of that, decided we'll fight fire with fire. And Bloody Sunday sadly became a recruiting agent for the IRA and other paramilitary groups for nearly 25 years afterwards.
And why do you think that it didn't become a recruiting agent in your case?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I did think about it, and after Bloody Sunday, my best friend actually joined the IRA. And I remember passing a checkpoint on one occasion, and I recognized, even though he was wearing a mask, I recognized my best friend. And I remember going up to him and saying, "What's happened, Sean?" He said, "I joined because of Bloody Sunday." And I said, "Well, if you're in, I'm in." And I remember Shawnee bringing me to a recruitment officer's house, and the guy wasn't there. And I often think, but for the grace of God. Sometime after that, we had Operation Motorman, where the British Army came in en masse and took down the no-go areas. So now we constant like British Army foot patrols and mobile patrols and helicopters and so on, flying all over the estate. And you had match of the day on a Saturday night, and then you had the big match on a Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon, I was up in Shawnee's house. We were watching the big match when a British Army foot patrol came down the street, and they took a break around where Shawnee was, and a young soldier hunkered down just outside the window of where we were sitting. We were drawn to him, and we were looking at him, but he wasn't looking in. He was obviously watching for snipers and so on. And then I remember Shawnee asked a life-changing question. And he said, Don, when you see him as a human being, how could you kill him? And we saw this young guy who was maybe just 2 or 3 years older than ourselves. And you could see like he was some mother's son, you know. He was in a hostile environment, didn't want to be there, fearing for his life. And somehow we just connected with him as a human being, you know. And that was a very, very profound experience. There was another experience, you know, of a soldier I made cry. And the army had come in again after Operation Motorman. They were raiding a house nearby, and I had been caught inside kind of the ring they'd put around, the protective ring. You had soldiers around keeping them at bay while the raid was going on. But there was a soldier probably in his mid-30s and a bit pudgy, and he was left standing guarding Land Rovers that were parked while the soldiers were in raiding. And I always remember, you may not remember this, but people around my age would remember that at 5 minutes to 6 in the evening, just before the BBC 6 o'clock news, there was the magic roundabout. And in the magic roundabout, there was a jack-in-the-box called Zebedee. And this soldier had a Zebedee moustache. And I remember, Ed, I picked on him. And I started to make very derogatory statements towards him. And there were 2 young teenage girls to my right. And every time I would diminish this man, they would laugh, which was boosting my young ego. And I continued to be very vicious. And kept this up maybe relentlessly for 15, 20 minutes. And the next thing, one of the girls said, Jesus, he's crying. And Ed, I looked and the tears were running down his cheeks. And at that stage, I didn't know what to do. If he'd come and he'd hit me, I could have responded. But the fact that I, as a boy, had made a man cry, I didn't know what to do. And I just walked away, feeling utterly ashamed of myself. But it didn't end there. And this was my Christmas truce experience. I was very good at art. So I was registered in the Strand Technical College so that I could do advanced art. And on the way back from attending classes there, I had to come up through Brook Park. And midway up, there was a British Army Sanger just before one of the gates. And that was a first line of protection towards a British Army police barracks at the top of the park. And so the soldiers in the Sanger could see who was approaching and so on. And I walked past the Sanger, was about to exit when I heard the English accent, "Hey mate." And I turned around with resentment because you had to carry your pass, you know, and show identification. And when I turned around, it was Zebedee, unmistakable. And he recognized me. And he held me in a look that seemed to be an eternity. But it was probably for maybe no more than 10 seconds. And the next thing was, this soldier gave me the most beautiful smile and a wave. And even though he never said a thing to me, I knew what he was saying. And it was, I understand your hatred. I want you to know I don't hate you. And I turned around and I walked away. But I never ever forgot that soldier. And again, the reason why I say that it was my Christmas truce experience was, you know, the soldiers on the first Christmas of the Great War, on that first Christmas, like, we know that as well as standing to take photographs with each other, of sharing cigarettes and cigars and bully beef and cognac and beer and so on, that they played games, and one of the games they played was soccer. And the important thing was, what happened was they encountered their common humanity, because the propaganda on both sides was leading them to believe that they were fighting monsters. But when they met each other, they realized they were just like, in a sense, cannon fodder. They were just ordinary guys. And that's the sad thing, you know, and that was one of the most important lessons that I learned.
One big talking point around this time of year is the poppy. Quite famously, James McLean, Wrexham player, refuses to wear the poppy, and he deals with his share of criticism and, let's be frank, abuse every year over this. It's a really complex issue. I'd really like to know, what is your take on it?
That's a very fair question, and I'm happy to address it, Ed. I have absolutely no difficulty whatsoever with the British Legion poppy, and especially I have no difficulty with British people wanting to wear it. I have no difficulty with anybody wanting to wear it if they're comfortable. But I think we have to realise that, you know, the British Legion poppy is not just about commemorating the fallen of the two great wars, the First World War and the Second World War, but it's about commemorating all those who died and were wounded in all British campaigns. And so the fact that the poppy represents all British campaigns, then I completely understand and I support James McLean right to be a conscientious objector. And of course I was born and grew up in the same estate as James, so I can kind of understand entirely.
Last question, Don. How practically can we become people of peace?
It begins with ourselves, and it begins with kindness and asserting our common humanity. And you think of that British soldier whom I hated, how he changed me, you know, with that smile and that wave. He never said a word. He challenged me and he showed me that we're human beings at the end of the day.
Don Mullan, author and humanitarian, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ed, and hopefully in heaven we can play football together.
Sounds good. I believe I get new knees at that point, so yeah, that'll work. It was great to hear from Don Mullan there. An amazing story that he's got about growing up in a real place of political tension and seeing horrible injustice, choosing to not go down a path of violence, and instead football being one of the catalysts that made him choose a path of peace instead. And I think that's just something that we can think about, is us as human beings, how can we be people of peace? How can we bring about an atmosphere of peace? But also football, how can that be involved in the topic of political tension and world peace?
I think actually what football is really good at, I think we're getting really good at knowing when something's bigger than football.
Yeah.
And I think you see this with the Hillsborough disaster. Liverpool and Everton are so good at coming together around that. Quite often they've played each other around that time and they'll respect that. And, you know, we're really good at recognising when football is just a game and actually there's bigger issues. Football can be a platform used for good.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, as Don mentioned in that conversation, football was one of the tools that was used by the two opposing sides in World War One on the Christmas Day truce in 1914. You know, they exchanged gifts and supplies and things, but also like they played games and played football and that sort of thing. And it's one of the tools that can be used to bring people together, and football can be a real great unifier as well. Don gave his opinion there on players wearing poppies on shirts. I know James McLean has been somebody who has come in for a lot of criticism in the past. Well, I think it was interesting what Don was saying about how he's very much believes in the right for people to wear the poppy, and they should wear the poppy if that's what they feel to do. But equally, James McLean should also feel like that he's not forced to, and he should be respected for having his opinions and beliefs. And look, it's a really complicated issue. But one of the games that I wanted to bring up was the game in France '98, which was the first World Cup I remember. USA versus Iran, which was referred to as the most politically charged game in World Cup history, according to 442 magazine. And that's a really fascinating story, and I would really encourage our listeners to go and have a look at that, because that was a game that came about amidst real huge tension between the USA and Iran. There was this fantastic story about how the leader of Iran had told his players, he'd instructed them not to walk towards the American players at the
Because there's that
handshake.
whole thing, wasn't there, that you have your Team A and Team B, and traditionally Team B walked towards Team A.
That's right, yeah.
But the Iranian team have been told, under no circumstances do you walk towards the USA team.
Absolutely. And so FIFA, who in this situation turns out were really, really great, they sort of quietly went to the Americans and said, look, would you mind walking towards the Iranian players? And they agreed to. And then the Iranian players, as a sort of, I think they were quite touched by that gesture from the Americans, and they were told, okay, they're going to walk towards you. So they had white flowers. They each had a bouquet of white flowers to give to the player on the opposition team. And so they then gave that gesture in response. And then rather than having two separate team photos, the Americans and the Iranians came together and had one big team photo. You had an American player, Iranian player, American player, one big group. And it was really lovely. And it was just this sort of thing of one player or one team, you have to make that first step. I'm reminded of the verse in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. It sort of doesn't matter who's right or wrong or what we believe, who we believe to be in the right or who we believe to be in the wrong. We are encouraged by Jesus to just turn the other cheek anyway.
Yeah.
And that was sort of what Don was saying in his story, was that the compassion that the soldier showed him when he didn't deserve it made him realize that this was just another human being too. Yeah. And I don't know, I just thought that was just really moving.
When it comes down to us, I think a core value of Christianity is unity, isn't it? And I think for me that is looking at how we are different to other people and how we might be the same as other people, and recognizing that loving your neighbor is something that we are called to do. And for me, that isn't a surface level love. That is a empathetic love. And that is putting yourself in the shoes of other people.
Yeah.
Not everyone sees the world how you see it. And I think that is on a small level as well as a large level. And I think we can be putting ourselves into the shoes of people different to us and having some perspective as well.
Right, Joe, we're coming back to our trivia section.
We are.
You
yes.
had loads of confidence after this one.
I did. I think it's a bit of a questionable question. If I've got this answer, I think it's a bit of a questionable one.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see. So I'll read the question out again. Which German attacking midfielder scored 170 goals for Borussia Dortmund and was the featured player on the front cover of FIFA 17? You think you know it?
I think I know it, and I think the answer is Marco Reus.
Marco Reus is correct. Well done.
There we go. Marco?
Yeah, it's the German
saying
for
that's
Mark.
an extension of Mark.
Yeah, of course it is. Oh, yeah. We're having Marco.
Okay.
Just like we'd have Matthias or...
Would we?
Yeah.
Oh,
sure.
Wow. Sure. Change the game.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Interesting.
Well done, yeah. Marco Reus, what a player he was, by the way.
Still is.
He's playing in America.
I think he's in LA. Is he LA Galaxy? Maybe one of them.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to The Big Man Up Top. If you want to get in touch with the show, please ping us an email to podcast@ucb.co.uk. Please follow, subscribe, and give us some good reviews, as that will help us get the word out. Also, if you've enjoyed this, please tell your mates. A huge thank you to our producer Anthony for all the hard work he does behind the scenes. There will be a new episode next Tuesday, Ed.
Hopefully there will.
I'll see you next week.
See you later, Joe.